David Bottoms has been the poet laureate of Georgia for about a dozen years now. He holds a chair in poetry in English letters at Georgia State. Again, the author of many, many books of poems and a couple novels too. Now he did an extraordinarily generous thing tonight for this reading tonight. He gave up almost all of his, or a great portion of his honorarium to purchase copies of his new book to give away to anybody who wants a book here. There's a big pile of them out there. I think we got something like 230 or 40 copies, T. So take one when you leave. David, as long as his arm will hold out afterwards, I'm sure would be happy to sign them. But poets giving up honorariums, frankly, is a very, very rare thing. But then their honorariums themselves for many, many years, for most of us, were very rare things. I wanted to say something else about David other than this book. Somebody asked me a kind of dumb question last week, just about a week ago. They asked me, when was the last time I had my heart broken? And I said something like, well, that's kind of personal question. And then I just thought for a second. I said, wait a minute. I had my heart broken about 3 or 4 times just this afternoon, reading poems from this book, which I had just gotten to my class last week. And I was reading these poems cold. I'd seen some of them before, and heard some of them, but I was reading them cold. And they're incredibly whole, seamless, lucid, powerful. They have mostly to do with childhood, family, things like that. But I was just astonished, poem after poem, just almost randomly picking the poems. I think this is an extraordinary book, and you're lucky to get it for free.
Oh, that was super. Thank you, Paul. That was dynamite. I always like to read in Atlanta, and especially at Georgia Tech, because I get a chance to say once again publicly that nobody has done more for poetry in Georgia than Tom Lux. That's just the way it is. Look at this crowd. Thank you, Tom, and thanks for the books that these guys bought. And don't thank me, thank Copper Canyon Press, because Copper Canyon wanted to get the books around, and they sold these books at virtually nothing, really cheaply. So pick up a book if you will, please, and spread the word about it if you will. It's baseball season. Where's Tom? There you are. My mom's watching the Braves right now as we speak, and I don't know what the score is.
Several Georgia Tech ball players here tonight.
All right, where are the baseball guys? All right, guys, that's good. That's good. I had a baseball poem for you. Actually, I have several baseball poems. I'm going to read one. I've always been drawn. I see a lot of students here, and I'm not going to preach to the students. And I appreciate them coming and supporting me. But I've always been drawn to the poem as sort of a method of personal investigation and sort of a search for ultimate answers. And this is one reason. This is a Tolstoy poem. I'm a huge Tolstoy fan, as they well know, especially War and Peace. And if you haven't read War and Peace, you haven't read great literature yet. You got a real treat ahead of you. And as you know, after Tolstoy wrote Anna Karenina, he pretty much gave up on fiction in favor of spiritual concerns. His theology was not exactly orthodox, and they booted him out of the Russian church. You know that. He died excommunicated. But that's neither here nor there. What's important is the fact that he saw literature as a search, and saw the search itself as sort of meaningful for our lives. Now, what the hell does that have to do with anything here in baseball? Well, when I was a kid, I played a lot of baseball, you guys, and I was not a bad second baseman. until I hit high school. I was a pretty good second baseman. Then you get to a certain point, where you can't get around on the pitching. And that was my problem in high school. I just couldn't get around on the pitching. I was a fine fielder, so I sat the bench a lot in my high school baseball career for the Cherokee High Warriors. And what I did when I sat on the bench is I read. And this is a poem about pinch hitting in a ball game after having been sitting on the bench reading a Russian novel, War and Peace. And it's from my pal Ernest Suarez, who's a critic and was quite a good catcher in his day. It's called Pinch Hitting in the Playoffs. On the Cherokee High School baseball team, I didn't nab much respect for being well-read. All the real jocks got the at-bats while I warmed the bench, knocking off Russian novels. For me, that season was heat and dust, and the bad light of dugouts, and out in the glare, a constant scream off the infield, the outfield, the stands, until one afternoon, in a frenzied croak, the coach broke through the noise, "Grab a bat, grab a bat." Well, it was nothing as dramatic as a tie ball game, or even a squeaker we might pull out. Only a chance to take a swing in a game we had no chance of winning. I don't even recall the score. Only the chatter, the haze, the heat, the dust like cannon smoke drifting off the infield. Then the coach against the dugout fence, shooting crazy signs with his hand, cap, nose, eye, cap, nose, eye. And all I could think was, Lev Nikolaevich, don't let Prince Andre die. Prince Andre is a great character in that novel, if you know. You just don't want Prince Andre to bite the dust. And I won't give it away. I got to keep up with time here. This book is kind of an important book for me because people have called it my most what? Intimate book, somebody said. It's a very personal book. It's a book about family. And Tom and I were talking about what happens to you when you get older. Later on, you run into various medical problems, and family starts to become very important. And we were talking about Mr. Dickey at one time, who I knew for quite a long time. And I remember one time at a party over at Emory. It was a party in his honor, of course, and he was pouring himself a very large glass of chocolate milk. You thought I was going to say whiskey, but he had given up on the booze by that time, and he had destroyed his liver. And right out of the blue, he turned to me and he said, "David, there's nothing more important than family." And I thought that was pretty ironic, given that he'd done everything a man could in his life to destroy his own family. And very sad, because he died a very sad man, alone and sad. But this book didn't start out just to be a book about family. It's just that that's what happens to you when you hit 60, 61, 62. You start to think about these things. And these things started to gel for me. I'm going to read a couple of poems about my daughter, and I enjoyed that poem about your family. I've never read this poem, so I might miss a word. It's called A Cello Bird. My daughter used to play cello. She hasn't played it in a long time. But occasionally, we have this very small backyard with these great big trees in it, and this little patio, and you could drag the cello out there at night. And there's the birds in the evening, you see, and you play the cello, and the birds would kind of answer, which is kind of mysterious to me. And she would deny all that. But it's also a poem about losing your children. She's in school now over at Emory, and Kelly and I have been depressed for 2 years. And we'll tell people she's away at school, and they'll say, "Where is she?" "She's at Emory." "Oh, she's across town." But she never comes home, though. It's called A Cello Bird, and this is about her leaving home and practicing cello. On the patio, my daughter is practicing her cello. She's dragged her chair near the edge of the grass, where a patch of moonlight borders the woolly trees. If she looks straight up, she can catch a few stars. Straight ahead, the smudged dark. She leans forward, shoulders curled, and the shadows streaking the patio blend girl and cello into one clumsy bird, bent neck, hooked beak, one wing flapping. Before long, the trees sing back. When I was a boy, I too wanted to become a bird, and day after day whistle through the scrub woods behind our house. But the crows mocked me, and the cardinals ignored me, and the sparrows, thrashers, towhees, jays. Who knows how she charms those tiny voices out of the dark and keeps them singing in the yard? Who knows how far they travel, or where she's planning to go, all dressed up in that plumage of shadow? Who knows? This is what we wonder about. I know you wonder about this a lot yourself, don't you? Yeah. She just sent me a text, I think. I was reading out at West Georgia the other day. She called me right in the middle of a reading. This is a poem I have read before, also about her. When she was a small girl, 11, 12, 10, 11, 12, I don't remember exactly. She took karate lessons, and Kelly and I had a friend from Serbia actually, who came over. He is a martial arts expert, something like one of 5th degree, 7th degree, black belt, all that sort of stuff. He was in the Olympics or something, I don't remember what. So he started a karate studio. And my wife decides, in order to help him, with the business, et cetera, that Rachel, who was 10, 11, or 12, I can't remember, should take karate lessons. So we said, that's cool. So she signs up, takes these karate lessons, and she's in a class of maybe 14, and she's the only girl there, you see. And the boys don't like that at all. They don't like it because she's the only girl. She's very good also because she's had years of ballet. She's very agile. And quite frankly, she probably gets a little more attention because she's a family friend and she's the only girl. So I'm in there one day watching them work out. And they have this routine they do called hitting the heavy bag, where after they do a group thing, they individually come up and the instructor gives them instructions how to punch this bag. Kick, punch, whatever. And when it comes her time, she's coming up and she's following all the directions, and the boys are lined up against the back wall, and they start to snicker a little bit and sort of, under their breath, make fun of her a little bit. And this is how she handles that. It's called My Daughter Works the Heavy Bag. A bow to the instructor, then fighting stance, and the only girl in karate class faces the heavy bag. Small for 5th grade, willow-like, says her mother, sweaty hair tangled like blown willow branches. The boys try to ignore her. They fidget against the wall, smirk, practice their routine of huff and feint. Circle, barks the instructor, jab, circle, kick, and the black bag wobbles on his chain. Again and again, the bony jewels of her fist jab out in glistening precision. Her flawless legs remember arabesque and glissade. Kick, jab, kick, and the bag coughs rhythmically from its gut. The boys fidget and wait. Then a whisper somewhere, a laugh, a jeer. She circles the bag, jab, 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 flushed, jaw set, huffing with her punches, huffing with her kicks, circles to her left and glares. But only at the bag, alone, in herself, to her own time, in her own rhythm, honing her blocks and feints, her solitary dance, having mastered already the first move of self-defense. Yeah. She did that nicely. Thank you. Well, I'm going to continue to read some more family poems, I think, not many more. There's a reception out here afterwards, right? And we got food out there and everything, and books and such. And remember that the Kwame's books are out here. Please pick up some of those. Read a poem about my old man. And I'm going to drop back to this old book for this one. This is an old poem. Then I'll read a couple others about him when we'll go home. It's on page 108. I have to tell you, I've read this poem I don't know how many times, and I still can't remember the story that goes with it. I have to tell you three things about my father before I can continue. And the first one is that I'm not the real David Bottoms. He was. He's dead now. I'm only the junior version. And that's important. The second thing is that you guys back in the back here, my old man was a real athlete when he was in high school. He was a real athlete. He held a couple of state records in track, 440-yard dash especially. And he was not a terrific baseball player. He was good, but he was a phenomenal football player. He was a halfback. As a matter of fact, he was such a good football player, they held him back 2 years to play football in high school. And I used to kid and say, had it not been for World War II, he might still be there, hobbling up the backfield. That's the third thing I have to tell you, that World War II came along, we got into the war, and he joined, this would have been I guess early 1941, late 41, early 42. He joined the Navy with a pal of his. Margaret Mitchell was doing these radio ads for young men to join the Navy and serve aboard a new ship called the USS Atlanta, which was a new sort of prototype of a new heavily armed light cruiser. They escorted aircraft carriers. And my dad shipped out of San Francisco on the Atlanta with his pal. And the Atlanta had a very distinguished service record for about 5 to 7 months. I can't remember. 5 major battles until the night of November 13. That would have been Friday the 13th, 1942, when the Atlanta, at the head of a American task force, it was in a V. The Atlanta was right in the point. They sailed up this little body of water called Savo Sound. And I think from your perspective over here, there would be a little island called Savo Island over here, and a somewhat larger island called Guadalcanal Island over here. And we had a bunch of Marines up trapped on Guadalcanal Island, and my uncle was one of them. And they had given up pretty much. They were taking communion and last rites and all that sort of stuff. And at about 1 o'clock in the morning on a pitch black night, Friday the 13th, the American task force sailed into and meshed into what the Navy Department called a superior Japanese surface presence. It means they had more boats than we did. And a Japanese destroyer, shined a spotlight onto the deck of the Atlanta. The Atlanta swung all 6 gun turrets. My old man was in gun turret number 6, which would have been stern top. And they shot that light out. And that started the naval battle of Guadalcanal, which, for all I've been able to read about it, was one of the fiercest naval battles in the history of the world. You'll get some idea of that when I tell you that these guns on these boats are designed to shoot with some accuracy at 12 to 14 miles. And I interviewed a guy who was on that ship, not my dad, and he said those ships passed within 400 yards of each other. And the Atlanta quickly took 49 Japanese shells and 2 torpedoes. And some shells from the USS San Francisco also, because they're just shooting like crazy everywhere. And my dad was severely wounded. The first shell that hit his gun turret directly blew him out with severe head wounds and side wounds and into the Pacific Ocean. And he was as good as dead to the world. And his best friend who had joined the Navy with him jumped out of a lifeboat and pulled him aboard the lifeboat. Then he spent 2 years in the hospital, 1 year with amnesia. But anyway, as I say often, this poem has nothing to do with that. Little to do with that. I just love to tell that story. This poem is really about me, and it's about It's about me in the 6th grade at Canton Elementary School in Canton, Georgia. And where I went to school, the 6th grade was sort of a rite of passage, because this is the first time you actually got to change classes and choose your seats and all that sort of stuff. So this is Miss Sarah Reimer's room. I remember the woman well. She was bad to wrap your knuckles with a ruler. And I remember standing in the doorway of that room and looking over this empty room and choosing my desk. Being who I was, I went straight to the back of the room, and not only the back, but all the way over by the window in the back of the room. And I sat down at the desk, and I looked down at the desktop, and it was like something from the Twilight Zone, because I saw that, indeed, this was really my desk, because there was my name carved about that deep into the top of the desk. Well, I worried that over all day until I figured out that the building I attended elementary school in was the building my dad had attended high school in. And it was he sat in the seat that overlooked the playing field, the practice field. Anyway, years and years and years and years and years later, in a sort of alcoholically induced state of nostalgia, I remembered that desk. And I got the notion that maybe I had a certain moral claim to that desk, a claim that exceeded the legal claim of the Cherokee County Board of Education. And this poem is simply about going back to that classroom, that school building one night, say about 1 o'clock in the morning, with a crowbar and a flashlight and a ball-peen hammer to reclaim for my own what was no doubt meant to be mine. It's just called The Desk. Under the fire escape, crouched one knee in cinders, I pulled the ball-peen hammer from my belt, cracked a square of window pane, the gummed latch, and swung the window. Crawled through that stone hole into the boiler room of Canton Elementary School, once Canton High, where my father served 3 extra years as star halfback and sprinter. Behind a flashlight's cane of light, I climbed a staircase, almost a ladder, and found a door. On the second nudge of my shoulder, it broke into a hallway dark as history, at whose end lay the classroom I had studied, over and over in the deep obsession of memory. I swept that room with my light. An empty blackboard, a metal table, a half globe lying on the floor like a punctured basketball. Then followed that beam across the rows of desks, the various catalogs of lovers, the list of all those who would and would not do what, until it stopped on the corner desk of the back row, and I saw again, after many years, the name of my father, my name, carved deep into the oak top. To gauge the depth, I ran my finger across that scar and wondered at the dreams he must have lived as his eyes ran back and forth from the cinder yard below the window to the empty practice field, to the blade of his pocket knife, etching carefully the long, angular lines of his name. The dreams he must have laid out, one behind another, like yard lines, in the dull pre-practice afternoons of geography and civics, before he ever dreamed of Sabo Sound or Guadalcanal. In honor of dreams, I sank to my knees on the smooth oil floor and stood my flashlight on its end. Half the yellow circle lit the under edge of the desk, the other threw a half moon on the ceiling, and in that split light I tapped the hammer easy up the overhang of the desktop. Nothing gave but the wall's sharp echo, so I swung again, and again harder and harder still, and half anger rising to anger at the stubborn joint, losing all fear of my first crime against the city, the county, the state, whatever government claimed dominion, until I had hammered up in the ringing dark a salvo of crossfire, and on a frantic recoil glanced the flashlight, the classroom spinning black as a coma. I've often pictured the face of the student who first pointed to that topless desk, the shock of a slow hand rising from the back row, their eyes meeting over the question of absence. I've wondered too if some low authority of the system discovered that shattered window and finding no typewriters, no business machines, no audio-visual gear missing, failed to account for it, so let it pass as minor vandalism. I've heard nothing, and rarely do I fret when I see that oak scar leaning against my basement wall, though I wonder what it means to own my father's name. Two more little poems. Two more short poems, also about my old man. He had actually a football scholarship to go to Mercer University, back when Mercer had a football team. I talked to Vince Dooley about that one time. He said it never was a very good football team. But he had a football scholarship. He didn't get to go because he got all shot up. But years later, that's where he sent me to school. My dad died an agonizing death. He was 88 years old. Had been an invalid for a number of years. They figured out finally that he had leukemia. He'd never go to a doctor. Just in terrific pain, just withered away. When he was still in relatively good shape, when he could get around with a walker, he started to lose his hearing, and just eventually went stone deaf. I mean, I would come home and find him sitting at the kitchen table with his hearing aids. He always tried to adjust his hearing aids, and there'd just be hearing aid parts all over the kitchen table. This is the way he adjusted them. And I'd have to take them back down to Atlanta, which was, kind of a hassle to have them all repaired again. Well, this is a little poem called "My Father Adjusts His Hearing Aids." Once again, my old man has gutted his hearing aids. On the table beside him, around the smallest blade of his pocket knife, his hearing aids lie scattered like the scrutinized guts of bugs. Somewhere in those parts, the corals, the discs, the blue copper veins, somewhere in that chaos lies the riddle of sound. Now in the dark kitchen, he faces the window where the first stars tremble in the branches of his oaks. The house is as quiet as a broken watch. He's pieced the clues. Nothing will ever be repaired again. Nothing will ever work as it did. The dumb wind says as much, and the needles raining in the yard. The silence around his shoulder is my mother's arm. That's kind of a downer too, isn't it? Yeah. One last poem. At the end, he was not completely lucid all the time. Sometimes he would want to talk and you could talk and he could follow what you're doing, and other times he was just someplace else. So this last poem I'll read, it's on page 51 if you're following along, is what it was like trying to talk to my dad at the end. It's just simply called A Chat with My Father. Sometimes when my old man tries to talk, his mind runs like a small boy on a path through the woods. You know the story. There's home to get to, and it's getting late. Only a little light still slicing through the trees. And the boy has walked the path so many times he thinks he can do it in his sleep. But no. Some bird sounds off way back in the woods, and he tries to ignore it, but it harps again, and suddenly he's off the path, deeper and deeper into the trees, wading the shadows, following the strangest and most beautiful bird song he's ever heard, until he crosses a stream and catches in the corner of his eye a ruby as big as his fist, sure, a ruby or some rock just as precious, and bends to pick it up when a wild dog, no, not a dog, when a wolf barks across a gully, and he's beating his way through brush and briar, trailing those barks and howls already fading in the distance. All the while, the woods have grown dark. And suddenly, he looks across the table, and you see in his eyes that he's lost.
Can't think of a better way to end this season. Please pick up some books of David's. It's kind of not fair that we have so many of David's to give away. So there are going to be about 15 books of Kwame's up there for free. I'm going to take care of that. So the 15 brokest undergraduates or brokest people here pick up a book of Kwame's on the way out. Those of you who have a few bucks, buy a book of Kwame's. Let me just tell you a couple of the people who are coming in the fall anyway. Alpha Michael Weaver and Terrence Hayes are going to read together at one of the, I think the first reading, and the second is going to be this terrific young poet named Michael Dickman and a very established poet named Naomi Shihab Nye. To thank again always Ginger and Travis, all the people who help out in doing this, Terry for welcoming us to this wonderful venue here at the Paper Museum. Have a good summer. We'll see you in the fall, I hope. Thank you.